This is Kenya's biggest conversation. A very good morning and welcome to our audience on KTN Home. We've been here since 6 and we'll be here until 10. And this happens each and every weekday morning. As we begin the hour, CT Muga, please remind us today's proverb.
If the moon loves you, why worry about the stars?
If the moon loves you, why worry about the stars? Because you want to be loved by many, not by one big one.
If God loves you, why worry about these humans?
Oh, so the why worry when you can pray? Or should it be why pray when you can worry?
Why worry about them? Let's welcome our guest in the studio this morning, Musalia Mudavadi, the leader of the Amani National Congress and a presidential hopeful. Thank you very much for joining us again, sir, and welcome to the Situation Room.
Well, thank you. At least it's good to see you guys here. One thing is confirmed, that COVID didn't reach you.
We thank God.
Yeah,
Yes,
thank
we
God
do.
for that.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And also, good that we also confirm the same.
Right,
We haven't heard anything about COVID and you
right.
in the same sentence.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good thing.
Right.
So still pushing on with the campaigns for 2022, still positioning yourself for that race.
Yes, that is happening, my friend. But of course, it has to be at a lower scale. One, because the elections are still 2 years away, and then clearly you have to operate within the rigid protocols that we all have to continue observing, bearing in mind that COVID is still with us, and we don't want it to spike again. Yes.
Is that something that everybody's picking up on, even as we talk about it? Because I remember specifically during the National COVID Conference, you said these exact words, and you threw out the warning to politicians across the country. And I believe the president then quoted you in his speech the same day, saying that we ought to be careful. But it doesn't appear that anybody's being careful, even after that.
Yes, I mean, not everybody is being careful, and it worries everybody because, you see, at the end of the day, what comes out of this is, do you really believe it's just a matter of anxiety, or are we also people who have been now clearly inducted into the culture of impunity as a society? Because ordinarily, I think we should all be very, very careful. And that is why when I spoke at the conference, I said, who are the actual fault lines? Where's the weakest link in this battle against COVID? And more so, those who seem to be breaching the guidelines with at the highest levels. And I think I'll still maintain that politicians in this regard seem to be one of the most dangerous fault lines.
And why is that? Is it because you feel that you're above, not above the law really, but that you can bend the law?
It's impunity, my friend. I think people have the wheels of justice sometimes take too long. And what we have seen is that perhaps people need to be, to some extent, people may need to be jolted into reality through the law enforcement agencies. That first of all, an election has not been declared. If there's an election has only been declared in Mosambweni. This is where we are going to have the elections and maybe a few by-elections. But the rest of the country, there's no election that is taking place. So I think, and there are laws that govern this, laws that make it clear when you can start your electioneering process and so forth. So if there are any activities now, continued heightened activity could be very detrimental to the country. And indeed, just a few days ago, we have seen the incidents in Muranga. Did anybody have to die at this stage or at all? for that matter, because politicians are aspiring.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Still talking about politicians and how politicians have been conducting themselves during this period. We can name all of them and even place fault on each. The president goes out to meet people, and people obviously come out to see their president, and they will forget and not really observe the physical distancing. The former prime minister will do the same. The deputy president will do the same. Musalia and Mudavadi will go to Nyeri, and people will come out to greet him. What did you feel when you were in Nyeri? And, you're speaking, yes, from atop this vehicle, but people are crowding near you. Were you not feeling, I've got a responsibility to these people with COVID-19?
Yes, we do. And that's why I say that we are a dangerous fault line. And I think because we are not following the etiquette, let's put it plainly, people are getting jittery about the election process, and somebody thinks that somebody somewhere may be getting an upper hand if he continues to talk or is allowed to talk. But the reality is 16 months or so to the election is a pretty long time. And I think, frankly speaking, our focus should be on what matters. The debate around education, which has come to the fore, the issue of resuscitating the economy. I think these are very critical areas that should actually be the focus point as we speak, not necessarily the kind of roadside shows that we are keen to as politicians. So I speak knowing that I have also breached these regulations, and it is not in self-reflection. It is something that we all need to address. Yeah.
What should happen? If you were the president and you are hearing this advice from Uhuru Kenyatta, who is the leader of ANC of Jubilee, and you are the president, the leader of...
No, I think very clearly there's some guidelines about public gatherings and meetings, and it's really for the government to enforce this. At the peak of the COVID, they did enforce some of these things. So if it is clear from the conference and from what experts have been saying that we should not let our guard down, this thing could resurface with even more potent force if we are not careful. So I think the law enforcement bodies should basically say that they are not going to allow certain kinds of gatherings until the situation is clearly safe for all Kenyans.
Do we have within our laws anything that clearly stipulates or anything that strengthens the arm of our security forces with regards to this? Meaning, do we have within our laws anything that can be applied to ensure, apart from just banning it, which we understand, if someone goes against those regulations, what can actually be done?
Actually, you can be taken to court. I mean, if the guidelines regarding what should be observed, and these have been gazetted, so clearly there's some penalties for the breaches of these gazetted guidelines.
So essentially, this is actually now directly a direct responsibility of the government.
But precisely.
Okay. And so we could argue that the government has been derelict in its duties.
You have a point there, because the government should come out. Essentially, why do you get into government, or why is the government there? Apart from governing, they are also supposed to guarantee the security of all its citizens, and therefore more serious enforcement of the prudential guidelines that have been provided is necessary. They should not walk away from this. I think if they were enforcing what they should enforce, those young men in Murang'a should not have lost their lives.
Much as we say that the government has this responsibility, it has a constitution, it has a mandate to enforce the laws that have been passed and the laws that are in place, there's also the part of personal responsibility. And Musalia, I'd like us just to be very honest and sincere. When the citizens look at you people in leadership, the senior people in leadership, there's yourself, there's Raila, there's Kalonzo, there's Ruto, there's the president himself, and others, you are in one class. And so it is very possible for Kenyans to look at you and see there's absolutely no way President Uhuru Kenyatta would order the arrest of Musalia Mudavadi without there being, ramifications, even political ramifications around the country. So probably the president would not really be quick to act on Musalia as he would be very quick to act on Eric Latif or even Johnson Sakaja. But Musalia, no. So maybe it's a bigger responsibility for you as Musalia, also being a leader, to ensure that you do not do these things that show the public that you are breaching the law and then saying, but the government should enforce.
You have a point. I'll not run away from that really the onus lies in providing leadership. The leaders must lead by example. That is a fact. So we have breached, that particular aspect. But I don't think to enforce the law, the president should give an order. I think the law should be enforced. You cannot be waiting all the time that Musalia is busy punching Latif, and you say you're waiting for the president to order the arrest of Musalia.
Call from above.
So that he can stop punching Latif. I think if there's a law enforcement person on the scene or somewhere, he should play his role.
I think this is the cry, though, that the law has not been enforced in the past. And what that does is that it then gives leaders, politicians at this point, then the mindset that nothing is actually going to be done if I break the rules.
Yes, and that is the dangerous thing that we must, especially as we're moving close to the election. I mean, you know why we had a crisis in 2007, 2008, because it started like this. The hostile language that was being brought out there by political players, it soon filtered into the ordinary citizens.
Yes.
And they started regarding others as outsiders and non-outsiders. Yet we are all Kenyans. We have seen very vulgar language being spoken only a few weeks ago, where people now think that in order to gain attention, you start going into issues that you should never really be going into, personalizing matters.
Right.
Now, systematically, this is building up into the wrong thing. We have also seen people questioning that why should the police be going for the small people and not the big people? I think maybe the authorities should just look for 1 week and round up as many of these politicians like Musalia Mudavadi. And
This is like music to our ears.
yeah, and then give it some shock therapy. So that people can come to reality.
What if, for instance, as we've seen in the past, unfortunately, this was something that was leveled at politicians who were regarded as opposition politicians, just simply ban gatherings. Simply, just ban it. Say, no gatherings. Period. Or keep it within the guidelines, 3 or 4 people. But these open air meetings, meet the people tour, ban it. No meet the tour people. No, yes.
No tour, meet the people.
Nothing. No, not waving at people in marketplaces. Yes. Stay in your home. Now,
the argument that the politicians will come and tell you is they have a constitutional right to assembly and all those things. These people are very good at going at the law that they have made and picking out a line and telling you, you see, the Constitution guarantees me the right to association, right to assembly, freedom of assembly, and all those things. Now you're coming to curtail my rights.
Given the health situation that we have in this country,
Absolutely.
you can absolutely abrogate those rights and put them in a dustbin or confine them in a place until we have a guarantee that such gatherings will not infringe on the health rights of the citizens.
Yeah, you see, I agree with you on this one because the the health of the citizens come first.
Yes.
Guaranteed health is also a constitutional requirement for the Kenyan people. So, frankly speaking, a more robust enforcement of these prudential guidelines is necessary. And politicians who are engaging in this activity should actually be called out. We should not be left, perhaps even if it means naming and shaming that this is going on. Look at what has happened to Trump the other day. You know, even him, he knows he's unwell.
Yep.
Yeah, and he pulls the kind of stance he's been pulling.
Yep.
What does that reflect?
It actually argues that Trump is consistent. in good health and in ill health, he's consistent.
He's the same man.
Yes. He doesn't deviate from the norm.
Right.
Yes. And he doesn't let small things like illnesses get in the way of doing what he wants. But he's a good example to look at, because the very thing that he's now undergoing is what it's argued he perpetrated the dangers of COVID on his people.
Right.
With his utterances. If one were to study the effects of leadership or bad leadership, that would be a perfect study. Because all his utterances, none of them were preventative with regards to COVID. If anything, it was laissez-faire, meaning make your own decisions. Just do what you think is okay. And went as far as even claiming this COVID really is not really true. Calling it a Chinese disease. All manner of things, but facing and saying we have a problem, we need to deal with it. He didn't declare it an issue. Even now, with his own condition, he seems to be trying to make a very light of it.
Yeah, he's still talking about the flu season is coming, and every flu season of 100,000 people you will die.
See?
And we have dealt with it before. We shall deal with this COVID same way.
And and if you look at the numbers and you look at the crowds that come whenever senior politicians like yourself are in a place, one could argue that you're no better than Trump. Because the moment you have a meeting and you know people are going to crowd, because that's what they will do. And as it is in many of our towns in this country, people already disregard just the basic safety rules of COVID. They do. They don't wear masks. Social distancing is something you simply talk about, but it's not observed. If you wear a mask, it's for compliance when you're walking towards a police person. But beyond that, people don't bother. So, in essence, the example that we refer to as bad examples that have been propagated by Trump, you, our wonderful leaders, seem to be following him step by step. You're toe to toe with him because you're doing exactly the same thing to the citizen.
Yeah, you remember when the whole pandemic started, there was some serious attention across the board.
Yes.
And perhaps the actions that were taken at that time may have helped in slowing down the spread of that pandemic in our environs. But going forward and knowing that this issue is still a problem, and we are now talking about opening schools and so forth, I think we really, really need to think seriously and get the enforcement in place. And I do agree with you that Trump is not a good example.
What I was going to say, Mheshimiwa, is this.
So we should not be like that.
What stops you, Musalia Mudavadi, from actually leading the pack in this matter and saying you will not hold meetings, you will not do this because of this consequence, you are not going to be pulled by this, because there seems to be this pull that you can't be left behind what others are doing. Now, must you follow the others in their bad example? Why can't you make that stand and say, I, Musalia Mudavadi, I'm not going to do this because of the following reasons?
You know, they're prudential guidelines, isn't it? Yes. If it is a funeral, I think they've allowed 200 people. If it is any gatherings, there are certain limitations of those gatherings.
Yes, they have.
I can tell you that I've been very, very rigid in trying to enforce that. True, I've come across unfortunate situations where I've been railroad stopped in Karatina and so forth, and the only way sometimes to get out of that is to actually tell them that there are no gatherings, so they should allow you to go through. Yes. These are the kind of circumstances that I have found myself in. But in reality, the message you're putting is very important, that we should lead by example.
The others may not follow that lead. That's why I'm addressing you. You, what stops you from taking those steps and then talking about it and saying, I'm Musalia Mudavadi, these are the steps I'm taking, this is what I'm doing? Because if you do them and you're quiet, we will not know that you're doing it. Will we?
No, you will not. But will you also give me the publicity that we are doing it?
Yes.
That is the other side of it.
You see, if you want to make that announcement, you will get the publicity that
because-
here I am and this is what I'm declaring. And I'm also leading by example. You also have access to the social media platforms and all these other platforms where you can say, look, this is my meeting. This you can observe and see. Everybody is observing all the prudential guidelines, and this is what I stand for. Consistency, consistency, consistency. You will be covered. Even if the first one you're not covered, the third one will be covered by another media house. We'll cover you in the first one. We like to give out the space to everybody who is speaking in the country. We will give you the space.
Well, I'm yet to observe that.
You make the announcement.
I'll be watching very
You
closely.
make the announcements and then hold us accountable to our word.
It looks to me like now we're just going into this whole thing of then looking at
This is Kenya's biggest conversation, the Situation Room, broadcasting on Spice FM, on KTN Home, online on Spice FM KE, on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and www.spicefm.co.ke. We have with us in the studio Musalia Mudavadi, Amani National Congress Party leader and presidential hopeful come 2022, and we are discussing issue-based politics. Is this a reality? Is this just a fantasy? Is it something that we just put it out there just so that we check the boxes and we say, even Kenya, we just like the rest of the world? Ndu, I had interrupted you and you wanted to ask a question to Musalia before we went to the break.
Yeah, sure. I mean, just going off of this, I mean, you hear and you say things like, okay, well, if I don't come out and address the people directly, then will they hear me? And this is the thing about issues and issue-based politics. Whether you see an individual or not, those issues still remain very real to the people of Kenya. And this has been the cry now for a long time. And they're asking current leaders and future leaders, whoever they will be, are you really addressing the issues that concern Kenyans? Or do you want Kenyans to see you as the character as opposed to the issues which they're hoping will be addressed?
Well, I think I can speak without blinking that I'm one politician who addresses issues. I talk a lot on matters that really have a significant bearing on our country and the impact that they have on our people. When I talk about the economy, the issues I talk about debt, the implications that this huge public debt has on our ability to get out of our economic crisis. These are issues that I'm constantly talking about. What is the implication of debt on taxation? What is the implication of debt on the cost of living? It runs through. It's a thread that eventually affects our livelihoods. So I usually talk to these issues. But to be honest, I am disturbed that for a long time, and on here I'll not even spare the fourth estate. We've been fixated, or they get people fixated on the very simple, divisive issues. This is the reality. Look at the headlines for several weeks, and you ask yourself in the print media, which headlines are actually talking to issues? It's either this politician or that politician, this politician or that politician, and rarely about the content, but about the altercation that they are mudslinging each other. Always
About the content from the politicians or about the content from...
By the way, I don't think the fourth estate should get away from this one.
So
Because if I'm a politician and I'm only shouting, surely isn't there also a cutoff point where the media will say, look, this guy has no content. He's all about ranting. So we have no business really covering him on this particular issue, so that you can also seek out the issues. I'm not. You see, when we see people running away from, let's take this hustler
Dynasty narrative.
debate and the narrative. Frankly speaking, if I were to ask you what is the issue here, other than trying to create a platform of a divisive political arena. You know, when our forefathers came into play, they said that at independence that the target is to fight ugonjwa, ujinga, na umaskini. That was the philosophy.
Yep.
All right? Ignorance, disease, and poverty.
Yep.
We should be fighting poverty.
We are still fighting all three.
We should not, true, but we should not try to start glorifying some aspects. There was this famous politician who passed on, but you all knew him, Martin Shikuku.
Yep.
He called himself the watchman of...
The people's watchman.
The people's watchman, or basically the watchman for the poor. And on one occasion, I remember, I asked this question. So would you like to see, this was a question I was asking, would you like to see a situation where there's permanent poverty in our society so that you do not lose your job
Your relevance.
or your relevance? You know? So we have to ask ourselves, shouldn't we be working towards fighting these things? And to me, issues are important. And I'll tell you this. And
Is it possible that that is actually an issue?
What? Fighting poverty?
No. The narrative, the narrative of hustler versus dynasty, is it possible that it actually is an issue?
Or is it possible
If it
that
was not an issue, would it be resonating with the people?
is it possible that it's based on a reality, or is it just a perception?
Do you realize that the people who are trying to brand themselves in one corner or the other are the farthest from what they purport to be rescuing?
Yes, hence the reality versus the perception.
So I mean, let's look at it differently. I think we are not addressing the issues that ought to affect us.
And I want to ask,
adequately.
but I want to ask again, separating the personalities, separating those that have been pushed into the dynasty's corner and those that have been pushed into the hustler's corner. Is there an issue here that is actually resonating with the people about the haves, the have-nots? J.M. Kariuki spoke about this. You saying Martin Shikuku is talking about this. Is it the same? Is it not an issue really that if you were to talk about it, if you just remove the personalities and talk about there's a class that does not have and there's a class that seems to have and seems to keep getting, is that not an issue?
It is an issue. And to address that issue is that we talk about it, but not to try and brand others that you are this and that. Look, when I talk about, say, the debt-related issue, frankly speaking, when have we seen the debt of this country jump in leaps and bounds?
In the last 7 years.
In the last 7 years, we've actually seen it doing a tumble turn.
Some miraculous tumbles,
It's even flown a little bit. At one moment, we thought it was a bird. Now we realize it's an amphibian. It keeps changing.
So who are the guys who have been at the helm when this debt is growing at this rate? What policies were they putting in place? So you fix us with massive debt, you load it onto us, and you come and tell guys, hey, we are the ones who are going to get you out of it. Come on.
So where is the voice then of the alternative voice?
Here it is.
Where is it that we see constantly?
This is the voice that speaks.
Because here it is. The last time you were here, you talked about the same thing, the issue of debt, and saying how you'd, run a government that's really focused on prudential financial management. But that voice is once in a while. You have opportunities. You have, I keep saying, you've got social media platforms. When we see Musalia Mudavadi, we see Musalia Mudavadi at the Musalia Mudavadi Center doing elbows with other leaders, we don't hear what you're talking about. Why is it that we...
Is it, my friend?
Is it that we don't give you the platform, or is it that you're not speaking about this as constantly as you should?
I am speaking about them constantly. Constantly. It depends on whether you choose not to see it.
So are you saying that
today I'll be a little bit at war with...
Go ahead.
I'll be at...
we were rather waiting, hoping you'd put on that hat. Yes.
I'll be a little bit at war with the Fourth Estate. Frankly speaking,
I want to ask you, for example...
frankly speaking,
yes.
I met some very serious people. And they said that, do you know, it's quite obvious that in this country, headlines are procured. I'll not name the person or the people, but they were very serious people.
Mm-hmm.
Muga here speaks
it was the first time you're hearing this.
No. It has been there, but you see, it's becoming louder. So Muga here speaks to it. He speaks maybe about education, or he'll speak about health or agriculture. Nobody wants to listen to him. Or he makes a very good point. It's hidden. He's put somewhere in the middle pages, somewhere there.
Some bottom column.
Or somewhere near the obituaries.
And then near the obituaries. And then I speak to the same thing, and I get a headline, and I've simply repeated exactly what Muga said.
Yep.
So
I'm waiting for the push here. I mean,
so the issues here is that we have to look at it collectively as a nation. All institutions, politicians, the Fourth Estate, and the Fourth Estate is very critical because that is really the medium.
It's a medium, true.
of conveying these messages across the board. So I am appealing to their sense of conscience here that it is time that they shape the narrative of this country for the better. Because you cannot make a country believe that it is about Musalia, about Latif, and about Muga alone, and our good lady here.
About Ndu.
Yes, and she's
I think it's time for us to call out that all those positive ideas, constructive ideas that people have, and by the way, politicians don't have a monopoly of this.
But I'm hard-pressed, Musalia.
They should come out.
I must admit, I am hard-pressed to see a series of occasions where leaders that are currently sitting, and even those who aspire, over and over and over again, have been talking about issues. In the last 6 months, throw a stone and it will land on people mudslinging and talking about how they are a better place than the other and how they feel that they've been trodden on because of their tribe or their class or whatever. I am hard-pressed to just look at the debt issue that you talk about. How many times have we seen leaders who are looking for positions in the future come and harp on this issue over and over and over again? Look at education, where things seem to be up in the air now, for example. And it's a few people. Every now and then somebody gets bored and goes on Twitter as a leader and says something and condemns a move. But that's it. Nobody's having active live debate about these issues that are affecting Kenyans who people essentially want to lead. So if you ask me, you will if you serve it up, if you present something, that's what's going to be served up. But you talk about the fact that somebody writes something about agriculture in the paper and nobody pays attention to it. And a leader then says something, or somebody in a position of leadership says the same thing, but it's given the headline. What does that tell me? That leaders have a perfect platform to talk about some of these issues that are affecting Kenyans, but are not. They're more interested in personal politics and personal expediency in how they will be put out in the front light for Kenyans, not about the issues that affect Kenyans. That's what Kenyans see, and I'll tell you for free. That's what Kenyans see. Kenyans don't believe that their leaders are there for them. Kenyans believe that leaders are there for selfish gains. And unless somebody comes about to change that narrative, that's what Kenyans think. They're going to cheat you for a few minutes here when you go to a rally in Nyeri and tell you that they're very interested in what you have to say. But the truth of the matter is that Kenyans don't feel that leaders have their backs. How are you going to change that narrative?
The question is, who is this fellow we are waiting for to change this? Unless it's us. All of us.
Now.
It's all of us. I mean, why do you allow us to get away with murder, if I may put it that way? We all, if it is an element of apportioning a bit of blame, yes, you can blame us, but at the same time, let us call out the issues. And as we debate, as we go on, by the way, your show is excellent because you bring out issues. But let me tell you frankly, your concern is equally my concern. That in Kenya, we are spending too much time not addressing issues. Even if you went to Parliament, for instance, and you go to Parliament, and maybe there's a very critical issue. The other day, they were extending the debt ceiling to 9 trillion. As they do that, there's very little insistence, even from that very house, of a full disclosure of what the debts are. You are approving a ceiling, but you're not
putting any conditions
to see what is on the table. And I'll give you an example that one of our legislators, and I think I mentioned this some time back, he is very advanced in bringing in a bill that will demand all these things that I'm talking about. And that is the way we have been approaching things at ANC, that let us systematically start clawing back onto what are the issues that matter.
Mheshimiwa, what is this thing that ANC does that makes it stand out? Because the thing that Kenyans are treated with is like a constant diet, it's words. We hear them, but when you have the same diet, sooner or later you'll get constipated. Okay? So you'll be worrying more about the state you're in rather than what you're eating. So I'm not talking about other political parties. I'm talking about ANC because that's the party you lead. The opportunity to do that which others simply talk about and never do.
Watch the space, because the bill is coming. The bill is advanced. And this is a bill that the party is taking very seriously. A bill that will speak to the management of public debt in this country.
Will it see the light of day once it gets to Parliament?
Let it get to Parliament. It is going through the motions very systematically. It has gone through the various committees and stages. Then it will come to the floor of the House.
That is one bill.
This is going to be a very significant contribution to the public management of finances in this country. And it should be embraced. And to me, these are the kind of things that I would say need to come to the fore.
Indeed. On that one, tick. Once it gets to the floor of the House, once we see the contents of the bill, and once we now interrogate it and see whether it really is going to help in the PFM of the country. Right. Sawa. Another thing that ANC has stood out for, has spoken very vocally about, and maybe even gone to push on the floor of the House.
My message to you is that our focus is on the economy. And a lot of the issues that we contribute to are those that are slated around management of the economy. And we can contribute to the extent that our legislators bring out very useful bills. This is the most significant, but we have also seen some of our senators make very pitched debate in matters of even revenue allocation.
Are you occupying a lonely place, a lonely spot, you as Musalia Mudavadi,
I was just about
in this ideal?
I was just saying that let me talk about the revenue allocation. For instance, there's recent debate in the Senate. Yeah, one of the
recent lengthy debate. In the
yes. One of and eventually some more rational approach was eventually found. And one of the senators who pitched highly on this matter was Senator Malala, who is an ANC member. So there are some things that we stand out, and this we always encourage that our members should seek to make a difference, a substantive difference, not pronouncements only, but even through actual legislation.
You spoke very strongly about the fourth estate. Now, if I'm to go back to what has been touted as the hustler narrative, yes, there is that narrative. Yes, there is a clear indication that the rules of the game as were previously understood seem to have changed. Because what you seem to want to espouse is, surely shouldn't someone know limits? But we are seeing that the politics we're in at the moment, these limits are not there. So that age-old rule of politics about there's only one rule, there are no rules.
Is it a good thing or a bad thing?
It's a horrible thing.
Terrible. Thing.
That's the message.
It's a horrible
so,
thing.
So
It's a horrible thing.
Thank you for that answer. It is a horrible thing.
Yes.
So do we let it pass because it's a horrible thing, or should we start?
No, you do not. But the fight that if I read the fight that people have, it's not a fight about the issues. It's about the person. So we are back to square one.
Back to personality-based politics. That's
Because,
where we are.
yes, when the narrative is heard from that particular group of politicians, what they're saying resonates with some people in the country. It certainly does. Because when you talk about poverty, there is no country in the world which doesn't have poor people. But the thing about our country, the number of poor people seems to be growing by the day. Now, COVID has done something that was unthinkable before. Those numbers have really, really grown exponentially. So, it's a situation that requires addressing. Now, in the absence of something that shows you a clear path of how you can move out from this poverty, that narrative will hold sway. And people will look at those they need to blame for the poverty and the problems that they are in. So that narrative certainly will hold sway. Now, how can it be fought? How can they be pushed back on that narrative by those who feel this narrative is divisive and it is wrong?
My message, very clearly, is that we are in a fix because a government's policies went south. Yeah.
Policies, really.
That's a different question altogether. But their approach to issues has taken us south. You know, and just for me to try and break down this thing a little more, I keep on bringing it back. We are in serious debt right now. All the companies that have shed off their staff are reeling backwards in heavy debt. Those who had plans of expansion are seriously hesitating or have completely abandoned them. And if anybody has an extra cent, all they're doing is buying bonds at 8%, 11%. Because why should I sweat and struggle when you can give me that 8%? So that means actual credit to people who want to do business is becoming a challenge. Now, when you have high debt, the shortest place, the shortcut for any government is to always to go for those areas where they get a quick buck. Petroleum products. So the tax instantly hits your petroleum products. It cuts all through. Because they're looking for the
Quick
place
money.
the quick money. I mean, so unless we unlock this, we're in trouble. Yatani gave his budget on the assumption that the exchange rate was going to be around 104 for the dollar.
Yeah.
It's what, 108?
Yes. Has been there for some time.
So between the time he gave his budget and now, our external debt maybe has shot up by maybe
couple of
200 billion
billions.
or something.
Because our debt is pegged to the dollar.
Do you have these? I'm very curious to know whether you have these conversations. I mean, even as leaders, do you have these conversations amongst yourselves?
I do.
Or when you sit and, I mean, it's just, bump into someone in a restaurant and having a coffee and talking about, did you see what that was last weekend? Or are you having these pertinent discussions amongst yourselves as leaders, as affects Kenyans?
I do. Whenever I meet other leaders, I address these issues, even at the COVID conference. That was there. I had to remind the Minister for Treasury that surely you cannot tell us that all is well on matters debt. You are sitting here speaking to Kenyans and telling us that all is well. I told him, no, it's not on. I mean, the president himself is already making remarks that the appeal is being made to the United Nations and others, for them to start looking at reprieve on debt to countries that I imagine.
Mheshimiwa, you've been Minister for Finance.
Yeah.
Okay. In your time, if you can recall, were we borrowing, whatever borrowing we did, was it based on the shilling or was it based on some foreign currency? Because this is an option that we have. And I think you know why I'm asking the question.
You always borrow. If the resources are coming from an external source, it has to be in hard currency. So you're either borrowing in euros, you're borrowing in dollars, or pound sterling.
Are there people who borrow in their own currency? Are there countries that borrow in their own currency?
The only time the government borrows its own currency is when it's buying the bonds from you and I. In the local market, that is where you put in your money at 8%, so that they pay you that. But all external payments must be done in hard currencies.
So how do you ensure that you have this safeguard, even if you're going to borrow in that foreign currency? How do you ensure or at least limit the possibility of this sort of wild exposure that we now currently find ourselves in?
They're basically two fronts. You either go for concessionary money or you go for commercial money. I think the mix that we have seen is that the government of the day chose to really rush for commercial borrowing and not concessionary borrowing. Concessionary borrowing, your interest rate would be 1% or even 2%, and you repay over 30 years.
Yeah.
30 years. These guys have gone into the market. They've taken money, 7% interest rate, repayable in 15 years.
Very expensive. Every time we have this conversation here with you, Musalia, you bring out these issues and you articulate them so well. My concern is I don't hear the Musalia voice on debt, on the economy, as often as I should be hearing it. And I'm saying this, yes, so you have issues with the fourth estate just covering up the issue of dynasty versus hustler and not getting the Musalia conversation happening. Have you written an opinion piece and sent it to the Standard and they said, no, we don't put Musalia opinion pieces? Have you written on social media and written articles on every day just tweeting about the debt and trying to explain to the people what this impact is, and then you see people saying, the comments saying, Musalia, what you're telling us is nonsense, we don't want to hear this? Have you done those?
I'll be very aggressive. I've been aggressive and I'll be more aggressive on it. I'll continue talking about it. I can assure you, Latif, that I have been making these points.
Make them a little louder.
And I will not tire. I'll continue making them. But I thought that I should highlight that I think this is a partnership of all the good people across the country. And when I say all the good people, I mean people who want to see genuine resolution of the crisis that we are in. By the way, the other day I was just joking and saying that, do you know, if for quite a while, the only business that has been thriving is the auctioneers business. You know?
They have, haven't they?
Very real to a number of Kenyans.
But because they're living distress on rent, they're doing what? Sure. They've taken everybody's cars. But one other thing, though, can you imagine that now even the auctioneers themselves are under pressure?
Yes.
Because
there's no one to buy.
There's no one to buy. And they also have to pay for go-down space. And now we are reaching a stage where the auctioneers themselves are about to be auctioned. so
the shoe's on the other foot. Eh?
Yeah.
It sounds funny, but it's actually a very dire situation.
It's a dire situation. But the message I'm trying to put across is that, frankly speaking, it is the economy. All these other side shows. When you have a country a nation, a small economy like ours, losing 2 million jobs within a very short time frame, when we see KRA unable to meet their targets every other time, this should start speaking volumes that the issues to be handled revolve around the economy. You know, and this begins feeding into other organs of government. The judiciary starts saying we don't have enough money to implement our programs.
Yes,
we have the governors saying that we now want to close shop because
You don't have money.
we have no money. Not money has been transmitted to them. People have not been paid salaries for 3 months and so forth. Gentlemen, this is
And
boiling down. And lady, sorry.
Patriarchy, right?
This is boiling down to the economy. And frankly speaking, if we are talking the politics of this country, and we are moving as if we don't realize that the economy is the biggest issue on the table, then I don't know what we are talking about.
Which boy,
Indeed.
you have a
Time
front
for
row
us to
seat.
conclude the conversation at 5 minutes to 8 o'clock.
Yes.
We are live on KTN Home, on Spice FM, broadcasting in Nairobi, Mombasa, Kisumu, Nakuru, Eldoret, Nyeri, Malindi. You're also online on www.spicefm.co.ke and on our social media handles, Spice FM KE, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. We've been having a conversation with the leader of the Amani National Congress, Musalia Mudavadi, who would like your vote to become President of the Republic of Kenya come 2022. And he has been, discussing with us the issue-based politics, and saying let's steer clear of the personality politics and let's look at the main issues. And for him, the main issue is the economy, and that's what you've told us. Thank you very much for joining us today, and of course, we always appreciate when you're able to spare a moment for us. This is a platform that you can use, and then you can now point fingers at the other members of the fourth estate. Keep it right here. The conversation continues. Good morning.
All right.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.